Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the idea of hope.
Always a good one.
We've got a passage from Job and some thoughts from Don P. Baker's book, Hope. Really want to unpack this.
That's good.
Like, what can we learn from this ancient wisdom about how to get through tough times?
Exactly. We're looking at advice given to Job by his friend Eliphaz. Now, Eliphaz, he doesn't have the full picture of what Job's going through,
Right.
but his words still raise some interesting questions about finding peace and resilience, even when things are rough.
So the passage is Job 22.21. It says, "Submit to God and be at peace with him. In this way, prosperity will come to you." I mean, that's a lot to unpack right there. Submit to something bigger than yourself, and you'll find peace. And even prosperity, does that really work that way?
It's the big question, right? And it's interesting, the Hebrew word for peace here is shalom, which is way more than just, an absence of conflict.
Yeah, it's not just about things being quiet.
Right. It's this deep sense of wholeness, of everything being in its right place.
It's like inner alignment.
Yeah, exactly.
But hold on, a lot of people hear that word submission and they think passive, like giving up.
Right.
Is that what this verse is really getting at?
It's a great point because there's a lot of nuance here. Think about James 4.7. It talks about submitting to God, but then it immediately says to resist the devil. So there's this active element, a conscious choice.
So it's not passive at all.
On it all.
It's more about like choosing what you align yourself with.
Exactly. It makes me think about, well, when have you felt that? That tension, between submitting and resisting.
Oh, all the time. Work-life balance, for sure. There's part of me that wants to just say yes to everything, every opportunity, but then I have to submit to, to reality, my own limits. Otherwise, I burn out.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Recognizing a greater good or a principle and choosing to align yourself with that, even if it means resisting other impulses.
So not just blindly obeying, but more like
Right.
aligning with what you believe is truly important.
Precisely. And that makes me think of how this connects back to that idea of prosperity. Because Eliphaz, he might have had a more material view of prosperity.
Yeah, when people hear prosperity, they think like getting rich.
Right, but look at Proverbs 3.56. Talks about trusting in the Lord will make your path straight. Or Joshua 1.8, meditating on God's word brings success. It's a different kind of prosperity, isn't it?
It's like aligning your life with your values leads to fulfillment, success, but on your own terms.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's Matthew 6.33. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well.
Whoa, so prioritize what really matters and then the other stuff, the prosperity stuff. It just follows.
It really does. Like, maybe we're going about this whole prosperity thing backwards.
Maybe.
Maybe it's not about chasing things, but aligning yourself with a deeper purpose and trusting that the things you need will fall into place.
Okay, so that's a pretty radical reframing of prosperity, but I want to go back to this idea of submitting to something bigger than yourself, because here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit tricky.
Okay.
Eliphaz is giving Job this advice with good intentions, right?
Plus, he wants to help.
He wants his friend to find peace. But the thing is, Job is suffering through absolutely no fault of his own.
Yeah, he's innocent.
So Eliphaz has got it wrong.
Yes, and that's crucial because it challenges this very simplistic idea that, good things only happen to good people, or that suffering is always a consequence of some wrongdoing.
Right.
Job's story just blows that out of the water.
It's a tough lesson because, haven't we all been there, judged someone's struggles unfairly, or even felt judged ourselves?
Absolutely. And that's where compassion becomes so important.
Right.
Recognizing that we don't always know the full story and that suffering, it can have purposes we just don't understand.
But we can't always see the bigger picture.
Right. Like the story of the man born blind in John 9.2-3. The disciples, they thought his blindness must be some kind of punishment. But Jesus explained that it was so that God's works could be displayed.
So the suffering served a higher purpose.
Yes, sometimes it's a purpose we just can't grasp in the moment.
So submitting to a higher power doesn't mean just accepting injustice or passively enduring suffering.
Right.
It's more about
Yeah.
finding a way to maintain hope and resilience even when we don't understand what's happening.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And it's the theme that runs throughout the Bible, this idea of finding hope in the midst of suffering.
Okay.
And, there's another big idea that Don Baker highlights in his analysis of this passage from Job,
Okay.
reconciliation.
So we've got submission, peace, prosperity, and now reconciliation.
It's all connected.
Tell me more.
Well, what's fascinating is that Job 22.21, while it's misapplied to Job's specific situation.
Right, because Joe hasn't done anything wrong.
Right. But what I'm saying is it hints at this much larger theme that runs through the whole Bible. Making things right with God.
Okay, so it's not just about personal gain, finding peace, achieving prosperity.
It's bigger than that.
It's about restoring a broken relationship.
Exactly. And 2 Corinthians 5.20, it makes it so explicit. We are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We're called to help others find peace with God.
It's like taking it to a universal level, not just individual benefit.
Exactly. And then you've got Colossians 1.20. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross.
Wow.
It just brings that idea of reconciliation to a whole new level.
Yeah.
It's about this hope for healing and connection on a much larger scale.
It's about something much greater than ourselves.
Exactly. And it's something to really think about. What does reconciliation mean to you?
Right, because it might be different for everyone.
Right. Is there something you need to make right? Within yourself, maybe, or with others, to experience that deeper peace?
That's really powerful. We've gone so much deeper than just reading a single verse. It's like peeling back layers of meaning.
It's amazing what happens when we really dig in.
There are connections between submission, peace, prosperity, and this concept of reconciliation. It's all tied together.
It really is.
And it makes these ancient texts feel so relevant to our lives today.
Absolutely. They offer us guidance for navigating the complexities of life, even thousands of years later.
It really is amazing how this ancient wisdom still applies today. I mean, it offers us guidance and insight for navigating the complexities of life thousands of years later.
And that's what we're talking about. Hope isn't just like wishful thinking. It's about action. It's about aligning yourself with what's good and true, seeking that shalom in all areas of your life.
Right, and that alignment, it can take so many forms.
Exactly. It could be about submitting to a moral code or dedicating yourself to something bigger than yourself, or even surrendering to the beauty of nature. The point is recognizing something larger than yourself and choosing to orient your life around it.
But I think a lot of people hear submitting to God and they think, well, that's kind of outdated. What does that even mean today? I mean, in a world where so many people don't believe in a traditional God.
That's a great question, and I think it gets to the heart of what we're discussing. God doesn't have to be, a bearded figure in the sky. It can be a principle, a force for good, or even just like the inherent order of the universe.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's about finding that thing that inspires you, that calls you to a higher standard of living.
That helps you move beyond your ego.
Yes, your limited perspective, and tap into something much larger.
Okay, yeah. So when we surrender to something bigger than ourselves, what happens?
Well, there's a sense of release, a sense of peace that comes from letting go of the need to control everything.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. Think about it. If there's a higher power at work, a force for good that's ultimately guiding things, it takes some of the pressure off, doesn't it?
Yeah, like you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Exactly. You can relax into a sense of trust, knowing you're not alone.
But what about when things go wrong? What about suffering? Injustice, things that just don't seem fair.
Right. And that's where the tension between Job's experience and Eliphaz's advice gets really interesting. Because on the one hand, you have this idea that submitting to God brings peace and prosperity. But then you have Job, a man who's deeply devoted to God, experiencing immense suffering. So how do we reconcile those two things?
It seems like a paradox.
It is a paradox.
Yeah.
And I think wrestling with that paradox is part of what it means to be human. Because let's face it, life isn't always neat and tidy. Bad things happen to good people. Sometimes we suffer, even when we're trying our best to do the right thing.
So where does that leave us? If submitting to God doesn't guarantee a pain-free life, what's the point?
That is the question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But maybe, just maybe, it's not about avoiding suffering altogether. It's about finding a way to move through it with grace and resilience.
So learning and growing from our experiences, even the painful ones.
Exactly.
So it's not about being immune to pain and about developing the inner strength to face it. And maybe that strength comes from knowing we're not alone, that we're connected to something bigger.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It brings us back to reconciliation. That idea is so central to Don Baker's analysis of this passage. Because if suffering is inevitable, then reconciliation offers a way to heal, to find wholeness even in the midst of brokenness.
It's like even when things are falling apart, there's this deeper current of hope
Yes.
pulling us through. But, if I can play devil's advocate for a moment, isn't this all just a way of coping with a harsh reality? Is it just like making ourselves feel better when faced with things we can't control?
That's an insightful question.
Yeah.
And I think it's one that many people wrestle with. Is faith just a crutch? A way of avoiding the hard truths of life?
Yeah, because if it's just a psychological trick, a placebo effect, then does it even matter?
Well, let's think about it this way. How might submission actually work on a psychological level? Just imagine, you're constantly having to make decisions about everything, what to eat, what to wear, what to believe in, what to prioritize. It's exhausting.
Oh, it is.
Right. But when you submit to something larger than yourself, whether it's a moral code, a set of values, a spiritual practice, it simplifies things. It gives you a framework for decision-making, a set of guiding principles that can help you navigate life's complexities.
So it's like reducing decision fatigue, finding clarity in a world that can feel chaotic.
Exactly. And that sense of clarity and purpose can lead to less anxiety, feeling grounded, connected,
Interesting.
right? It can even lead to a stronger sense of community as you find others who share your values and beliefs.
Wait, so you're saying submitting, even in a secular sense, can actually have psychological benefits?
Absolutely. And this is where the science intersects with the spiritual.
Right.
Because what we're talking about here are deep human needs.
Yeah.
For meaning, for purpose, for connection.
Yeah.
And throughout history, it seems humans have found ways to meet those needs through various forms of submission, whether it's to a deity or a set of principles or even a community.
So it's about tapping into something fundamental about being human.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this conversation so compelling. It's not just about theology or philosophy. It's about understanding the human condition, our deepest longings, and our search for meaning in a world that can often feel pretty meaningless.
This reminds me of something Don Baker says in his book about questioning, about exploring these ideas. He encourages readers to not just accept things at face value, but to really dig in and see what resonates.
Absolutely. It's good advice for anyone, regardless of their beliefs, because these ancient texts, these timeless questions about hope and suffering and the meaning of life, they're not just for theologians or philosophers. They're for all of us.
They're part of our shared human heritage.
Exactly. And by engaging with them, by wrestling with these ideas, we can deepen our understanding of ourselves, our world, and our place in it. We can find new ways to connect, to heal, and to create a more meaningful life.
What's really striking me is that even though Eliphaz didn't fully understand Job's situation, his words still sparked this incredibly rich conversation about hope and resilience.
Right.
And this search for meaning. It's like even flawed perspectives can contain nuggets of wisdom if we dig deep enough.
That's such a great observation. It speaks to the importance of approaching these texts with a discerning mind, being willing to question, to challenge, to look for the deeper truths that might be hidden beneath the surface.
And that's a great takeaway for our listeners, too. Don't just accept things at face value.
Right.
Question, explore, and see what resonates with you.
Find what works for you.
Find what helps you cultivate hope and resilience in your own life.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. It's about finding a way to live a good life, a meaningful life, even in the face of challenges.
And uncertainty.
Exactly. And these ancient texts, these timeless wisdom traditions, they offer us guidance and inspiration for that journey.
So what stands out to you most? What's resonating?
I think it's this realization that submission, when you understand it in a broader sense, it's not about weakness or blind obedience. It's about choosing to align yourself with something larger, whether it's as a set of principles, a spiritual practice, a community, a cause you believe in. And that alignment, that surrender, can actually be a source of strength, of resilience, of peace.
That's so powerful because it totally reframes how we think about submission.
It does.
It's not about giving your power away. It's about choosing where to place it.
Exactly. Recognizing that true freedom comes from aligning yourself with something larger than yourself, something that transcends your individual ego and connects you to something much greater.
Surrendering to something that can lift us up, guide us, and ultimately bring us home to ourselves.
That is beautifully put.
Oh.
And it makes me think about something we touched on earlier, that idea that suffering can have a purpose, even if we don't understand it.
Right, like in the story of the man born blind. His suffering wasn't punishment, it was an opportunity.
For God's works to be displayed.
Exactly. And maybe just maybe, that's true for all of us.
Maybe.
Maybe our struggles, our challenges are not meant to break us, but to shape us, to refine us.
To help us become more of who we're meant to be.
That's such a hopeful way to look at it. Like, even when we're going through tough times, there's this potential for growth
Mm.
and transformation.
And that potential is always there, waiting to be unlocked. It's just a matter of choosing to see it, choosing to believe in it, and
Hmm.
choosing to align ourselves with the forces that can help us bring it to fruition.
You know, I've been thinking a lot about prosperity, and I think what's becoming clear is that true prosperity, it isn't just about money or success.
It's much more than that.
It's about living a life that's aligned with our deepest values, our purpose, and our connection to something greater.
That's beautifully said. And when we live in that way, when we're aligned and connected, the other things, the material comforts, the success, the recognition, they tend to just fall into place.
And it's like we're not chasing them anymore. They're drawn to us.
Exactly. Because we're vibrating at a higher frequency. And that higher frequency, that sense of inner peace and alignment, that's what true prosperity is all about.
Okay, so let's circle back to something you said earlier about prayer, meditation, reflection. Because I think for a lot of people, those things can feel a little intimidating, especially if they're not religious.
I understand that. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be as simple as taking a few minutes each day to just quiet your mind, connect with your breath, be present in the moment.
So creating space for stillness.
Exactly. And in that stillness, in that space between thoughts, we can start to tap into a deeper wisdom, a deeper knowing that's always there.
It's like tuning into a different frequency, a frequency of peace and clarity.
I love that analogy because that's really what it's about, shifting our focus from the external noise and chaos to that inner stillness that's always present within us.
And in that stillness,
Yeah.
we can hear those whispers of guidance
Nudges of intuition.
to help us make choices that are good for us.
And as we make those choices, as we align ourselves with what's good and true, we start to experience a deeper sense of peace and joy and fulfillment.
I'm starting to see how it all connects.
It all ties together.
It's like a cycle. The more we submit to a higher purpose, the more peace we experience, the more aligned our choices become, and the more we're able to live a life of true prosperity.
It is. It's like a beautiful tapestry.
Yeah.
All these threads woven together, creating a rich and meaningful whole.
And it starts with that simple act of surrender.
Letting go.
Letting go of the need to control, trusting that there's something bigger at play.
It's about recognizing that we're not the center of the universe,
Yeah.
but part of something much greater, something that's always guiding us, supporting us,
Yeah.
loving us, unconditionally.
And in that recognition, that surrender, we find true freedom, true peace, and true prosperity.
That is beautifully said. I think that's a perfect place to pause for now.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground, way more than just that one verse from Job.
We have. It's amazing how much depth there is to these ancient texts.
We've been talking about submission, peace, prosperity, even reconciliation, connecting all of it to psychology, history, even personal experience.
And I think it just shows how powerful these ancient texts are. For starting conversations, they're not just words on a page. They're living ideas that still resonate with us, offering us guidance, even today.
And speaking of guidance, Don Baker, in his book Hope, EP, he offers some really incredible insights. His take on Job 22.21, it gives us this profound framework for understanding how submission, peace, prosperity, and reconciliation are all connected.
It's a really great book for anyone who wants to understand hope better and how to cultivate it in their own life.
For sure. We'll put a link to his book in the show notes. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've been talking about how submitting to God or aligning ourselves with a higher purpose can lead to peace. But what about the flip side?
Yeah.
What are we holding on to that might be preventing us from experiencing that peace fully, I mean? What are the things we cling to? Those beliefs, behaviors that keep us stuck in suffering, anxiety, discontent?
That's a great question. It's a call to really examine our lives, to see where we might be holding ourselves back from experiencing all the hope and peace that's available.
It's about becoming aware of those patterns, the habits that aren't serving us anymore, and then letting them go.
Sometimes letting go is the hardest thing,
Yeah.
but also the most liberating,
It's like making space for something new,
more aligned with who we really are, with our purpose.
with our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
And that's what this whole journey of hope is all about, letting go of what doesn't serve us. embracing who we are and what we can become.
Trusting the process, even when it's hard. Knowing that we're not alone, we're being guided and supported every step of the way.
Beautifully said. And, you don't have to do this alone.
Right?
Seek guidance.
Hmm.
Find support. Inspiration from others who are on this journey too. Share your story, your struggles, your wins.
Because when we come together, when we share, we create this collective tapestry of hope that can help others find their way.
Weaving our individual threads together,
Yeah.
we make a fabric that can withstand anything.
So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep seeking, keep believing in the power of hope to change your life and the world around you.
And never underestimate the power of a single verse to spark a journey of discovery.
Until next time, deep divers, keep seeking, keep questioning, keep diving deep. We'll be here to guide you.